Just block the enemies. Most silent runs fail on Ascension 10 because they can't block consistently. But on the silent, block is everything, and damage can come from anywhere. Today I'm breaking down every single card on the silent to support her defensive game plan. This video is broken up into 7 parts. General discussion on silent and her game plan, the block cards, the Shiv package, the poison package, the Slay cards, additional damage cards, and finally essential support cards that don't quite fit into any of the other categories. Now let's jump in. Part 1. Silent core game plan. The silent has the strongest defensive options in the entire game. With access to premium defensive scaling and neutralizing her starter deck, she is able to pretty much block any enemies from the beginning of Act 1. To succeed on the silent, you must secure efficient block solutions for the endgame while not falling behind on damage for the early elites. While silent is a very defensive character, she also does not lack good damage options either. Shiv and poison are some of the most pronounced damage packages, but she also has very individually efficient damage cards. When you are defensively solid, damage can come from a wide range of places and not necessarily limited to a single synergy. Silent is very strong in Act 1 and will take less damage compared to the other characters, but there are times where there's not enough damage present in the deck, making a super early elite dangerous. This is particularly true in the Overgrowth, since elites there have an even higher damage requirement. Since the late game block plan is so strong on the silent, you don't have to force max elites every run. But with the correct cards, you can absolutely destroy every elite in Act 1. Finally, a defining mechanic on the silent is Slay. Slay is a keyword that says, whenever you discard this card, play it for free. This is similar to the discard synergy cards from Slay the Spire 1, but even stronger. Slay effectively functions as both energy cheat and card draw. Let me give you an example to illustrate this point. Let's compare Sneaky Strike, refunds energy if you have discarded another card this turn from Slay the Spire 1, and Ricochet from Slay the Spire 2. Both are more or less discard cards that deals 12 damage. But Ricochet is significantly stronger thanks to the Slay keyword. When you want to activate Sneaky Strike, not only do you need a discard source in your hand, you also need a third card to be discarded, lowering your hand size. Let's say you only have Survivor Sneaky Strike in hand, you cannot activate its effect. Ricochet, however, does not have this problem. You can just happily discard it with your Survivor and end up with one more card in hand compared to Sneaky Strike. With Survivor being in the starter deck, the first copy of Slay card is usually already open. And since prepared is a common, the Slay synergies are more or less present in most runs. You don't need to go all in for an infinite combo. Just having some Slay in your deck can greatly increase your output and consistency. In fact, committing to only Slay cards without addressing the short-term challenges the game throws at you can often lead to failure. In the following sections, I will break down Silent's entire card pool to help you master this defensive yet flexible strategy. Part 2. The block cards. Blocking is one of the most important things to do on the silent. Being able to solve block for the endgame can win you most runs. Let's rank out the block options that silent has access to and see which ones are worth picking. The first card, After Image, 1 energy power. Whenever you play a card, gain 1 block. I don't need to say too much about this card. This card just blocks for way too much every single turn. You can kind of pick every single copy because the more copy you stack on top of each other, the better it gets. In addition, it also synergizes very well with Shivs. It synergizes very well with Slay, because when you discard the Slay card and the Slay card autoplays, that counts as another play for After Image. The upgrade is also quite good. In this game, there are not that many enemies that hit you for a lot on turn 1. So you actually have ample time to play After Image on turn 1 without being punished. Overall, one of the best block scaling options on the character will be a solid S tier. Anticipate, 0 energy skill, gain 2 dexterity this turn, upgrades to gain 3 dexterity. So if you're able to play Anticipate and play like 2 more other block cards, that's gonna be 0 energy 4, which is okay, it's a deflect. Obviously, if you're able to play more block cards, the value gets higher. Early game Anticipate I don't love. If you do not have the card draw to support it, you draw Anticipate and no block cards, it's basically a brick. So you do need to be able to consistently draw Anticipate with other block cards in hand. Later in the run, if you're able to scale your dexterity other ways, Anticipate is also not super necessary. So this card is a little bit awkward. If you're not able to find any other block scaling solution and you're able to consistently draw a hand full of blocks, then Anticipate value goes way up. So there is a place for Anticipate, but that just doesn't happen very often. Usually you just have way better ways to scale your block. And early on in the run, Anticipate kind of doesn't provide too much value, unless you happen to get a lot of card draw or volley plans early. So anticipate a little bit situational, but the effect it provides is decently powerful. So if you can make it work, I'll be placing this in B tier. Backflip. 1 energy, gain 5 block, draw 2 cards. So like I have mentioned before, the entire identity of Silent kind of revolves on blocking, and this card blocks and draws. It's one of the best block cards on the character. If you're able to make this gain 5 block number larger, then you can kind of pick like every single copy of Backflip. And even if it's only blocking for 5, the value on this card is just high enough, you can still pick like 2 or 3 copies. Drawing cards also allow you to line up your Slay synergies more consistently, allows you to deploy your powers earlier. And in this game, when you are trying to set up your powers, you kind of just want to block, and Backflip provides that block. So again, very, very strong block card. Backflip will go to S tier. Next card, Blur. Gain 5 block. Block is not removed at the start of your next turn. On the surface, it's a defend. You play 1 energy block 5, but the block is not removed at the start of your next turn. In fact, it's really, really strong in this game. Very often, you're able to overblock the enemies even without any dexterity, and you have a block stored up for next turn. If you're able to play Blur every single turn, you essentially have Barricade. So as a baseline, the first copy of Blur already gets into my deck, and if you're able to generate any sort of dexterity or have any other block scaling, you can pick more additional copies of Blur. The only real downside of Blur is that it doesn't do damage. So if you really need to find an early game damage card and it's up against Blur, maybe you want to consider the damage card. But on the Silent, since you can block so much, usually you can block every enemy, so that scenario doesn't happen too often. There are not that many enemies in this game that punishes you for picking Blur. In Slay the Spire 1, just like the Nobber, just a slime boss, which really demand you to play a lot of damage cards, but that pressure in Slay the Spire 2 just doesn't exist. That's why Blur is also a lot better in Slay the Spire 2. So again, very powerful effect. Blur would also be an S tier card. Next up, we have Dash. 2 energy attack, gain 10 block, deal 10 damage. So the damage portion of Dash is just very sad. 2 energy, 10 damage, extremely below rate. So the block portion is where this card has its value. Unfortunately, the block portion of this card is also too low. The upgrade is really good, +6 value upgrade. So if it comes upgraded, then sure, but unupgraded, 2 energy, just a little bit too expensive. Again, in this game, you're like trying to deploy your powers, you're picking out the card draw to draw into your powers, and the expensive card like Dash just doesn't pair particularly well with the card draw you're gonna pick. So you rather have just smaller block cards to play while you're deploying your powers. Furthermore, it doesn't scale well with dexterity, it doesn't scale well with afterimage. So Dash, in practice, just end up being not very good. In the early game, super early game, Dash will save you HP in the hallway, but usually you can pick something better than Dash. Maybe a damage card that deals way more damage or better block cards. So Dash just end up being a desperation pick. If you're dying in Act 1 and you have Dash against nothing, you can pick the Dash. Otherwise, this card doesn't have too much potential. Dash will be going into C tier. Deflect. 0 energy skill, gain 4 block. Now, 0 energy cards are really good, especially on Silent, since you have access to all this card draw. And 0 energy block also scales very well with afterimage, with dexterity, or even without any of that, it's just gonna save you chip damage in hallways. So first copy of Deflect pretty much always gets into the deck. If you do not have any ways to scale up the Deflect, then the second copy is a little suspicious because it's a little bit low impact of a draw. You'd rather draw your better cards earlier. 4 block is not that high of a number. It does cost you a draw. But first copy, it's generally going to be very good. And if you are able to make Deflect go higher, very, very powerful. If it's upgraded, 0 energy, 7 block, insane. You can click every copy. But yeah, unupgraded Deflect, pretty good value for the first copy. But you don't want to pick too many of these to slow down your deck. Deflect will be going into A tier. And dodge and roll. 1 energy, gain 4 block, next turn gain 4 block. So 1 energy, block 8. Pretty good value. The fact that the 4 and 4 is separate lines of text means it scales twice with dexterity. Upgrade, insane. +4 upgrade on 1 energy card. So again, the first copy of dodge and roll pretty much always picked. Just blocks for way too much. The second copy of dodge and roll is a little questionable if you do not have any ways to make it larger. This card can pair to Deflect. Does have more potential since it scales twice as much. Also plays very well with potions. You have like a random speed potion. You can double dip with dodge and roll. Yeah, 1 energy blockade, the number is just kind of big. So once again, dodge and roll, very, very good block card. Pretty comparable to Blur. It's a lower ceiling but higher floor Blur because you don't require other block cards to make dodge and roll good. But if you have a bunch of block cards alongside of Blur, the upside is much higher on the Blur. Escape Plan. 0 energy. Draw a card. If you draw a skill, gain 3 block. A very simple card. There are just like no enemies in this game that punishes escape plan. Maybe the test subject in Act 3, but that thing only have like 100 HP. So usually you don't need to play around it too much. But other than that, it's just free block. 0 energy draw card, so it doesn't even cost a draw. And sometimes it blocks for 3s. Anything to make this number larger is even more value. The upgrades to +5 block. So the only reason to not pick escape plan is it's up against something better. So it's kind of hard to evaluate escape plan, but if it's up against nothing, you can like pick every single copy. Also a decent clone target. I'm gonna put it in S tier because you can just pick every single copy, but sometimes there are gonna be a lot of time where you're gonna pick like even a D tier card over escape plan because you just need that other card more. Footwork. Yeah, 1 energy gain 2 dexterity, upgrading to gain 3 dexterity. This card's insane. Playing footwork just allow you to block everything. Yeah, it allows you to block everything single enemy in the game, including the Act 3 bosses. Gaining dexterity in this game is just kind of nuts. One of the strongest block scaling option on the character, probably in the game as well. It's right up there with After Image. I think I personally prefer After Image over footwork, but After Image is a rare, so you're gonna see more footworks usually. Anyways, you will pick both of them all the time. I see footwork, I will pick it. I see the second copy of footwork, I will also pick it, and I will upgrade them. The upgrade is also very good. Footwork will go into S tier. Leg sweep, 2 energy skill, apply to weak, gain 11 block, upgrading to 3 and 14. On the surface, you might think this is a little bit inefficient. 2 energy, 11 block, kind of sucks. But the 2 weakness is very important. Making the enemy weak at all times, might as well say you take 25% less damage or forever. That's a very powerful effect. And leg sweep helps a lot with that. So generally speaking, you do want a leg sweep for every silent deck. The only reason why you do not want a leg sweep would be you have so much weakness already in the deck. The applying 2 weak effect is no longer relevant because applying more weak to the enemy doesn't make them do less damage. You just need to make sure they are weakened at all times. You don't need to stack like 20 weak on the enemy. So that's the only scenario where leg sweep is not going to be a good card. But usually that doesn't happen. Usually 1 neutralize in the starter deck is not enough to keep the enemy weak at all times. So again, leg sweep will go into S tier. But yeah, if you are overlaying weakness already, you probably don't want to pick leg sweep. Next up, we have Malaise. We were just talking about how overpowered weaknesses, and here's a card that applies a million weakness. The upgrade is also good, +1/+1. The loose strength part on the Malaise card also plays pretty well. There are a lot of enemies that hit you with multi-hits. In the end game, the Act 3 bosses pretty much all have multi-hits. The Queen multi-hits you, the test subject have multi-hits in the 2nd and 3rd phase. The door has a multi-hit attack, so Malaise is very strong against Act 3 bosses. Just against any boss in general, even if they do not have multi-hit, this minus strength will just save you a lot of damage over the course of the fight. As I have been talking about, the weak keyword is just so strong, you kind of want to make sure the enemy is weakened at all times. Malaise help a lot with that. Some of you might hate the hunter-killer enemy in Act 2, the one that makes you lose strength and dexterity every card you play. Guess what? That enemy has a multi-hit, and Malaise just shuts down that enemy completely. So very, very powerful defensive scaling card on the silent. Once again, Malaise will be S tier. These tiers are like not ordered. They are alphabetical. Next card, Piercing Wail. All enemy lose 6 strength this turn, exhaust. Another very powerful defensive option on the silent. If you're noticing a pattern, every block card on the silent is kind of overpowered. So again, a lot of enemies have multi-hit. Piercing Wail completely destroy them. There are also a lot of AoE fights in the game. Piercing Wail also destroy them. One of the hardest elite in Act 2 is the triple centipede, and play 1 Piercing Wail, you suddenly take 0 damage for the turn. Very simple effect, very powerful effect. You can kind of just pick every single copy of Piercing Wail. The only cost to that is the opportunity cost of not picking something you need more urgently. Another very, very strong defensive option on the silent, Piercing Wail, also S tier. Shadow Meld, 1 energy skill, double your block gain this turn, upgrading to 0 cost. Very, very important upgrade. So for 1 energy, you play Shadow Meld, you don't have that much energy left over to play block cards. So the output on Shadow Meld, unupgraded, end up being not that high. Upgraded, however, you actually get a very large amount of output out of Shadow Meld. So if you're picking Shadow Meld, you should try to upgrade it. Shadow Meld is pretty comparable to Anticipate. It's a skill you play, and the block cards you play this turn are more effective. This is just larger. Interacts very well with Blur, with dodge and roll. If you are able to Shadow Meld Blur, then you store up your double block for next turn. And Shadow Meld makes dodge and roll twice as good. So next turn you get 8 block. Early on, a little too draw order dependent, and if you don't have the energy to support it, the 1 cost does hurt this card quite a bit. But if you have an upgrade to spare, this card is quite good. Since this card is a rare, and there are just better rare cards on on the silent, you're just better even on common card on the silent to scale your block. I will have to put this in B tier. Sucker Punch. 1 energy, deal 8 damage, apply 1 weak, upgrade into 2 weak. Upgrade pretty good, doubling the weak amount. As a damage card, Sucker Punch kind of sucks. 1 energy 8, pretty below rate. So it all comes down to applying weakness. Applying weakness is a very powerful effect. However, applying 1 weak is not that much. And if you're overlaying weakness, the weak doesn't matter. So as an early damage card, Sucker Punch doesn't do enough damage. And later on in the run, if you already have plenty of weak, Sucker Punch is redundant. So this basically only comes down to if you cannot apply enough weakness, you have to pick a Sucker Punch in that sort of desperate situation. For these reasons, I will have to put Sucker Punch in B tier. Applying weakness is very, very good. Sucker Punch just happens to be like the worst way to apply weakness, but there are just times you just need any weakness as you can get your hands on, you can pick a Sucker Punch. And finally, we have Suppress. One of, if not the strongest, starter card upgrade ancient in the entire game. Baseline 0 energy innate, deal 11 damage, apply 3 weak. This upgrade is kind of ridiculous, like what am I even looking at? Plus 6 damage, plus 2 turns of weak. If you pick Suppress, it's like immediately upgraded. It's one of the best upgrades in the game. And since you're probably going to be upgrading Neutralize, Neutralize is a very good upgrade. Transforming an upgraded Neutralize to Suppress will give you Suppress Plus immediately. Usually for the Ancients, I want to look at all the other Ancient options, but for Suppress, since this card is so overpowered, we don't really need to do that. You can just click it every single time. It's the strongest option by far on the silent. Let me explain why. Effectively, Suppress says you take 25% damage for the rest of combat. Also, you do 17 damage for 0. That's also a freaking ridiculous effect. Very strong against hallways because you do so much damage. Very strong against bosses since they're going to be weakened for forever. This card is good against every single combat in the entire game. Yeah, Suppress, crazy card. Straight to the top of S tier. And that is all for the block cards. As you can see, most block cards on this character is very, very strong. The whole idea about playing silent is just securing block, and you have a lot of premium options to do that. Now let's move on and look at the Shiv card on the silent. Card 3, the Shiv package. Shivs are one of the core identities on the silent. They are 0 energy, colorless attack, deal 4 damage, exhaust. They provide pretty decent front load damage by themselves, and there are quite a few cards and relics that make them scale into the end game. They play particularly well with Strength Gain since most Shiv cards are able to generate a lot of Shivs. Let's take a look at all the Shiv cards. So first Shiv card, accuracy, 1 energy power, Shivs deal 4 additional damage, upgrades to 6. Very straightforward card, your Shivs hit harder. So Shivs baseline is 4, plus 4, you double the damage of a Shiv. So that's a very powerful effect. The upgrade also pretty good, plus 2 damage on the upgrade. If you have Shivs in your deck, accuracy is one of the best ways to scale them up. Usually Shivs by themselves can't really like kill the Act 2 boss, but if you have an accuracy, then you can deal with the Act 2 boss pretty competently with only Shivs. 1 accuracy, generally not enough to kill the Act 3 boss, but if you have accuracy with Shiv plus some other additional damage from other sources, or just multiple accuracies, you can kind of just deal with the entire game with only Shivs. If you do not have Shivs, however, obviously do not pick accuracy. There's no reason to speculate on an accuracy in Slay the Spire 2. The damage scaling requirement isn't so high that you have to blind pick something that doesn't work. So if you do have Shivs, accuracy is one of the best ways to scale them up. Therefore, accuracy will be in A tier. Blade Dance. 1 energy skill makes 3 Shivs, exhaust. The exhaust part kind of doesn't matter. You can say it's a downside because if you're leaning heavy into Shivs, you cannot redraw your Blade Dance to make more Shivs. But if you are just picking Blade Dance as an early game damage card, the exhausting is the upside, you don't redraw that. As a baseline, 1 energy 12, good enough for Act 1. And it's one of the best ways to make a bunch of Shivs. So if you have any Shiv synergy, Blade Dance is the card that does the job the best. So since Blade Dance on its own, already a decent damage card, have a lot of potential to scale with Relic, to scale with other powers, it's a very good damage card to pick up early. Blade Dance will be in A tier. Next card, another Blade. This one is kind of stupid. Blade of Ink. Add 2 Inky Shivs into your hand. And Inky says the Shivs do 2 additional damage, so instead of 4, they do 6, and they apply a weakness, upgrading to 3 Shivs. So since they are Shivs, the Shivs are gonna scale with your Shiv powers, and they apply weakness. Applying 2 weakness as a 1 energy card, already a very powerful effect. Usually you only get 1 weakness from a 1 energy card. And since they are different instances, they also strip more layers of artifacts artifact. For example, if the enemy have like 3 artifacts, you can strip 2 of them with Blade of Ink. So 1 energy, 12 damage, 2 weak as a baseline, already very high in value. Then if you're able to scale up your shifts, this gets even more ridiculous. The overall stats on Blade of Ink is just way too high, and it has additional synergies. I will have to put it in S tier. Cloak and Dagger. 1 energy skill, gain 6 block, add a shift to your hand. On the surface, this might look like decent value. You get a bit of block and a bit of damage. However, the problem with Cloak and Dagger is it doesn't do either job particularly well. 1 energy 6 block with no utility is just kind of bad, and 1 energy make 1 shiv. If you have shiv synergies, 1 shiv just doesn't quite cut it. Upgrade to 2 shifts, so if it comes upgraded, the value is okay. But I don't really want to pick Cloak and Dagger into upgrade. They're just better upgrades on the character. The Cloak and Dagger end up being a pretty awkward card on the silent. You're not going to guarantee to find shiv synergies for your run, and you don't really require shifts to win any given run. So speculating on this card early game also doesn't help you. So unfortunately, Cloak and Dagger not that good. It's kind of similar to Dash. It doesn't perform the block or the damage portion of the card particularly well, and you rather just have a card that does 1 job very well instead of like a card that's mediocre in both of its functions. Cloak and Dagger will be in C tier for that reason. Fan of Knives. 2 energy power. Shifts now hit all enemies. Add 4 shifts to your hand. Baseline 2 energy for 16 AoE. That's a little below rate, but they are shifts, so if you are able to find shift synergy, this card gets better. AoE is pretty premium in this game, so if you have no way to deal AoE damage, Fan of Knives can do the job. But if you're able to do AoE damage with anything else and you have no way to scale up the shift, this card is a little too expensive. 2 cost power for 4 shifts, just not super great. Upgrading to 5 shifts, you probably never want to do that. Very often you don't even have the hand space to have 5 shifts. So yeah, so if you're already having some synergy with shifts, you can consider Fan of Knives if you have no way to deal AoE. If you're desperate for AoE, you can also consider Fan of Knives. So it does like that 1 job pretty competently. If you're not in either of these situations, the rate on Fan of Knives is just kind of not good enough. AoE is good in this game. I'll place Fan of Knives in B tier since it does the job. Hidden Daggers. 0 energy skill. Discard 2 cards, add 2 shifts into your hand. Upgrading to shift plus, so they will hit for 6. Discard 2 cards, usually an upside because you can discard all your slice energy cards, and you don't need to have 2 cards in hand to play Hidden Daggers, right? You can play Hidden Daggers as your final card. Then you effectively discard 0 cards. So even if you do not have any discard synergy, that discard effect usually is not the downside. There are also a bunch of random enemies that put statuses into your deck, and you can just discard the statuses. 0 energy for 2 shifts, so it's 0 energy for 8. That's already a pretty good rate. And again, you have a lot of ways to scale up your shifts, and making 2 shifts is just pretty good, especially for 0 energy. Very good value card even without any shift synergy. With shift synergy, gets even better. Hidden Daggers, also a solid A tier damage card. Infinite Blades. 1 energy power. At the start of your turn, add a shift into your hand. Upgrade to innate. This power on the surface might look a bit slow, but combats in Slay the Spire 2, they do go on for a while. So this just end up being one of the best ways to make a shift consistently every turn. There are going to be cards in Silent Card Pool that really cares about being able to make a shift every turn instead of making a bunch of shifts all at once. And even without any shift synergy, this is just good enough value by itself to solve or help deal with any of the bosses, especially the Act 1 bosses. Very good against Phantom specifically, because Phantom have Slippery that really cares about you playing a bunch of tiny attacks to proc that, and Infinite Blades kind of cleanly solve that problem. One of the good ways to scale damage on Silent, Infinite Blades also goes into A tier. Knife Trap. 2 energy skill. Play every shift in your exhaust pile on the enemy. Upgrading to upgrade and play. So shifts, they go from 4 to 6 damage. One of the best payoff for the shift package, if you're able to generate a bunch of shifts, Knife Trap deals a crap ton of damage. However, this card is a little slow. If you draw it early, it's like 2 energy do nothing, which is quite bad. You kind of don't really require an effect like Knife Trap until like the Act 2 boss and the Act 3 boss. So early on, this card is really bad against the faster hallway and elite fights. However, the payoff for Knife Trap is humongous. You can get ridiculous numbers out of it. So just as like a 1 card boss solve, it's solid. So for that reason, I would be placing Knife Trap in B tier. If you need that kind of boss damage, Knife Trap can just do it, but very often you don't require that. Eating Strike. 1 energy attack, deal 3 damage, add 2 shifts into your hand. The upgrade really doesn't matter, it's just +3 on the damage part. You don't get an additional shift. So as an early game damage card, 1 energy deal 11. It is a okay rate, and if you have shift synergies, this is one of the cards that can make you a bunch of shifts. Compared to Blade Dance, it makes 1 fewer shift. Compared to Hidden Daggers, it costs energy. So not as good as the other other shift generating cards, but if you really are desperate to generate some shifts, Leading Strike can do it. So very early game, it's alright. And if you have shift synergies and no other ways to make shifts, it's also okay. Not quite as good as the other shift generating card. I'll be putting Leading Strike in B tier. Phantom Blades. 1 energy power, shifts gain retain. The first shift you play each turn, deal 9 additional damage, upgrading to 12. Pretty significant upgrade. So Phantom Blades kind of similar to accuracy, where they just make your shift larger. Phantom Blade is higher floor, lower ceiling. Since if you're not able to make a ton of shifts, Phantom Blades will provide more value compared to accuracy. But if you're able to generate a lot of shifts, accuracy end up being stronger than Phantom Blades. The retain portion on the shifts end up being pretty helpful. Sometimes you want to just have like a 0 cost attack to be retained so it can trigger some ninja relics like Shuriken. And since the shift retain, you can usually just get the full 9 or 12 value out of Phantom Blades, even if you're not able to make a shift every turn. Phantom Blades plus Infinite Blades, just a very straightforward combo. You make 1 shift per turn and they do 9 additional damage. That can be like part of a damage solution. You don't need to lean further into shifts. You can just have Phantom Blades, Infinite Blades, and just do something else without picking more shift cards. So Phantom Blades, pretty competent damage card. I would say compared to accuracy, this usually is less damage, but still not too bad. I'll be placing Phantom Blades in E tier. Storm of Steel. Discard your hand. Add a shift into your hand for each card discarded, upgrading to Shiv plus. Very often, Storm of Steel just becomes 1 energy make 1 shift, or 1 energy make 2 shift, which is a little below rate. The reason being, you really kind of do want to play block cards every turn. When you play some block cards, you have like 1 or 2 cards left over in Storm of Steel. Storm of Steel doesn't even count itself, so it's very difficult to get any sort of value out of Storm of Steel. If you're able to draw like a massive hand every single turn, you're probably already winning. Then Storm of Steel end up being not necessary. If you're retaining cards with like Wally plans, then you really don't want to discard the card you are retaining. So Storm of Steel doesn't even synergize particularly well with retaining. Considering it's a rare card, and if a rare card says 1 energy make 2 shifts, that's just way too depressing. There are slight synergies on the character, of course, but this is like the worst way to trigger your slide cards. Usually when you're triggering your slide cards, you don't want to discard your entire hand. You just want to discard the slide cards in particular. I don't see why you ever want Storm of Steel. Storm of Steel goes into D tier. Finally, we have Up My Sleeve. Add 3 shifts into your hand. Reduce this card's cost by 1. So first time you play it's 2 energy, second time 1, third time 0. Upgrade to 4 shifts. This is like Blade Dance if Blade Dance was bad. If you play Up My Sleeve 3 times, in total you have spent 3 energy on 3 Blade Dances, so you don't even make profit. You're breaking even on the energy. The 4th time you play Up My Sleeve, you're finally gaining energy out of the discount effect. Very slow. Early game, I really do not want to be spending 2 energy on a damage card that only deals 12 damage. So without shift synergy, Up My Sleeve is also really bad. Obviously, Up My Sleeve gets way better if the fight goes longer. You can actually redraw it, so slightly better against bosses. But there are just way better ways to make shifts. If you're desperate to add more shift card into your deck, then Up My Sleeve can be considered, but usually this card is a little too slow. So unfortunately, Up My Sleeve will be in C tier. And that is all for the Shiv cards on the Silent. The Shiv powers are really quite good. They are the main way to scale up your Shiv damage without having to rely on specific relics like Shuriken or Kunai. And they're just a decent early game damage option that has some potential to solve your endgame. If you're not able to find those premium Shiv powers, you don't need to commit to Shivs. You just have like a couple Shiv cards in your deck for the early game, then you can pivot to something else. Let me know in the comments if you like accuracy or Phantom Blades better before we move on to Poison. Part 4, the Poison package. Poison is one of the most efficient ways Silent can do damage. They provide damage over time and can ramp up much more compared to their attack counterparts. The downside, however, is they are slow acting. Since the damage is spread across multiple turns, they cannot often burst down a dangerous hallway or elite fight. This is a little bit mitigated by their Silent's defensive plan, since she can just afford to block for a couple turns and let Poison do the work. Let's see which Poison cards are actually worth picking. So first up, we have Accelerant. 1 energy power, Poison is triggered 1 additional time, upgrading to 2 additional times. Accelerant doesn't actually increase your damage. They just make Poison tick faster. And if you're not able to apply a lot of Poison, often Accelerant can be a downside, since you would rather stack up more Poison to have them last longer. Let's give you an example. Let's say you have Snakebite, right? 7 Poison. With Accelerant in play, after 3 turns, it would have dealt 27 damage, and without Accelerant, it would be 18 damage. So Accelerant end up being 1 energy do 9, which is pretty terrible for a rare card. The thing you need to realize about Accelerant is the triggering 1 additional time effectively effectively deals the additional damage on the lower end of your poison count. So since for the first 3 turns, without Accelerant, you get 7, 6, 5, so the higher end of your poison damage. Accelerant effectively gives you 4, 3, 2. So that's actually not that much output. The only use case for Accelerant is that you're able to stack up a ton of poison. This does end up increasing your damage output since you're not going to see those lower end of the poison count ever. The enemy will die before that happens. However, the Silent just doesn't have that many ways to apply a ton of poison to any particular enemy. It's often not desirable to try to build a deck like that since you're doing that in the expense of being able to block or do front load damage with other damage cards. So unfortunately, Accelerant just does not end up being super good. If you do have that deck is able to apply a ton of poison, then you can consider picking up an Accelerant, but that's a pretty rare occurrence. So unfortunately, Accelerant will be in C tier. So next up, we got Bouncing Flask, 2 energy, apply 3 poison to a random enemy 3 times. So very bad in AoE fights since the targeting is random. This card does have the utility of stripping artifact 3 times, but there are just way better ways to do that. 2 energy for a damage card just end up being very difficult to play. You rather spend your energy on deploying your powers or playing block cards or more efficient damage cards. So Bouncing Flask end up being a very poor card. If you're like literally dying to the boss, then you can consider the Bouncing Flask as a scaling damage source. And as I have mentioned, AoE fights are pretty dangerous in this game, and Bouncing Flask is absolutely horrendous in AoE situations. So unfortunately, Bouncing Flask will be in D tier. Bubble, 1 energy skill. If the enemy has poison, apply 9 poison, upgrading to 12. So this card is kind of like Catalyst if Catalyst was horrible. So Catalyst doubles, upgrading to triples to the enemy poison. 1 energy 9 poison is an extremely good raid. So if you're actually able to trigger Bubble, it's really, really good. But very often that just doesn't happen. You do need to have another card in your deck that applies poison, and you need to draw that poison card before Bubble. There are some ways that you can make Bubble pretty consistent, and we'll see them later. But if you're not desperate to apply poison, you don't need to speculate on Bubble. Even if you have like 1 other poison card in your deck, that's often enough damage anyways. You don't need to pick an additional Bubble. Since the rate on Bubble is so good, 1 energy 9, kind of ridiculous. You could consider it if you're able to consistently proc it. So for that reason, I would put Bubble in B tier. Corrosive Wave. Whenever you draw a card this turn, apply 2 poison to your enemies, upgrading to 3. This upgrade is really good, like plus 50% on the poison. If you do not have any card draw in your deck, obviously Corrosive Wave is going to be horrible. So it's not super worthwhile to speculate on Corrosive Wave. If your deck is able to draw a ton of cards every turn, you're probably already winning, then Corrosive Wave could potentially just be redundant. But if you're in that situation and you don't have enough damage yet, Corrosive Wave is like a 1 card damage solve. Stacking up so much poison in 1 turn can often just kill everything in the game. But since it's a rare and it's so conditional, I will have to put it in B tier. Next up, we got Deadly Poison, 1 energy 5 poison, upgrading to 7. The upgrade is really, really good. However, unupgraded, it just doesn't have a place, right? Against the faster hallway fights, you don't want to play Deadly Poison because it's 5 damage. Even if it's like 5 damage, 4 damage, it's only 1 energy 9. That's not good enough. Against boss fights, 5 poison is just too little. It doesn't actually meaningfully improve your damage against the boss. So Deadly Poison, very awkward, not good at front load or scaling. Upgraded, sure, but there are going to be way better upgrades on the Silent than upgrading Deadly Poison. If you're literally dying to the boss, you're desperate for any damage card you can find, you can maybe pick a Deadly Poison. That just doesn't really happen ever. The Deadly Poison, not very good, will be in D tier. In Venom, 2 energy power. Whenever an attack deals unblock damage, apply a poison, upgrades to apply 2 poison. You're really not playing very many attacks every turn as this Silent unless you have Shivs. And if you have Shivs, there are just better ways to scale Shivs than in Venom. Being a 2 cost power is just way too costly for what it does. However, if you have Venom in play, you can kind of just kill every boss in the game, so it's not completely useless. The fact that it requires unblock damage is also a downside. There are a lot of enemies in this game that has blocked. The number on this card, 1 poison, is just a little bit too low. So as a desperation boss off, sure, Venom can do it, but other than that, for a rare card, not good enough. So Venom will be in C tier. Next up, we got Mirage, 1 energy skill, gain block equal to poison on all enemies, exhaust, upgrading to 0 cost. This card, in theory, could block for a lot if the enemy have a bunch of poison on them. If you're in AoE and you have poison on all the enemies, it also scales up that way. In practice, way too draw the dependent. If you draw it early before you apply poison, it's like 1 energy do nothing. Very often in the second draw, this is still like 1 energy block 10 if you're lucky. Silent just has so many other premium block options that Mirage is usually not required. However, it does block, and the block number can get big. I'll be putting Mirage in C tier. Noxious Fumes. 1 energy power at the start of your turn. Apply 2 poison to all enemies. Upgrade to 3. Very important upgrade. One of the first things you will upgrade if you have the card. This is like the best poison card on the character. One of the best ways to do damage on the character, period. You play Noxious Fumes, every enemy in the game kind of just dies, even like Act 3 boss. This is particularly good since it's a power. You can deploy it. Then as the poison is ticking up, you can just focus on blocking. So unlike the other poison card, you kind of need to play them over and over again. Just play 1 Noxious Fumes, maybe even 2 Noxious Fumes, and you can just sit there. Kills every boss, can even kill some elites. Extremely strong damage scaling on the character. You don't even need to think about Noxious Fumes as a poison card. You don't need any synergies to make it good. You can have 1 Noxious Fumes in your deck and you can have a Shiv deck. But Noxious Fumes just there to kind of bring that high-end damage scaling you might be missing. So this card can go into literally every silent deck. For that reason, this will be an S tier card. Outbreak. 1 energy power. Every 3 times you apply poison, deal 11 damage to all enemies. This power basically doesn't do anything. Applying 3 instances of poison is very difficult to do. You need to like spend 3 energies on 3 separate poison cards or play a Bouncing Flask, which is one of the worst cards on the character. And the payoff is 11 AoE, which is not even a lot. Very often in AoE fights, you need to front load them down, and Outbreak is way too slow. And as a scaling damage for bosses, Outbreak just deals very, very little damage. Let's be optimistic. Let's say you're able to apply poison every single turn. Let's say you have Noxious Fumes. Now Outbreak will be 11 damage across 3 turns. That's like 3 or 4 damage per turn. That's literally just Infinite Blades, but Infinite Blades have all these Shiv synergies to go with it. Outbreak has nothing. Infinite Blades also doesn't require any setup. You can just play Infinite Blades, and you get the value every turn consistently. Outbreak requires too much setup. One of the worst powers on the character. Outbreak will be going to D tier. Poison Stab. 1 energy attack, deal 6 damage, apply 3 poison. Upgrade to 8 and 4. Upgrade is pretty decent. The number on Poison Stab is barely passable in Act 1. It's like 9 damage immediately and then 11 damage if you get to the second turn, which is mediocre for a common. If you are seriously lacking damage and you are offered a Poison Stab against nothing, you can consider it. Other than that, this card doesn't have too much use cases. Poison Stab will go into C tier. Finally, we have the best card ever, Snakebite. Don't need to explain this card, it goes straight into top of S tier. Okay, Snakebite. 3 energy skill, retain, apply 7 poison. The retain on this card is like pretty relevant. You can just not play it until the enemy takes a turn off, so you can play it when they're not hitting you. 7 poison is just barely large enough. It's actually kind of competent against bosses, especially like the Act 1 boss. And the fact that it's targeted 7 poison on like Bouncing Flask is random enemies, it's not as bad in AoE fights. And since it's a skill that retains, it plays with flechettes. That's a pretty niche interaction. You don't really need to think too much about that. The upgrade on Snakebite is really good. Plus 3 poison is just so much more value than plus 3 damage on an attack card. You can think about it this way, right? You get 10 poison, 9 poison, 8 poison. So over the course of the fight, this could be a plus 27 upgrade if the poison ticks for its entire duration. So Snakebite, you can just think of it as a desperation boss off. If you don't have enough damage for the boss, you can pick a Snakebite. But other than that, 2 energy for 7 poison is just too bad of a rate to be considered most of the time. But I will be putting Snakebite in C tier. It's actually like the best way to apply poison with like a single skill. It's much better than Deadly Poison because Snakebite can actually competently deal with bosses. It doesn't require the upgrade like Deadly Poison. It's better than Bouncing Flask. It retains and the targeting is not random. That's all for the poison cards. Noxious Fumes is like by far the strongest poison card, also the strongest damage card on this entire character. Of the other poison card, you're not really interested in spending energy on a skill to apply some poison. You have to redraw that skill to play it again. That just end up being not very energy efficient. If you are lacking damage for a longer boss fight, poison can usually get the job done. Part 5, the Slay package. Slay is one of the strongest keywords in the entire game. They represent energy cheat and card draw in a game where you are often not guaranteed to see an energy boss relic. With Survivor, there's already an enabler in the starter deck. While most Slay cards are strong, let's rank them and identify the absolute top tier ones. The first Slay card, Abrasive, 3 energy power, Slay, gain dexterity, gain 4 thorns, upgrading to 6 thorns. Obviously, for 3 energy, playing this card kind of sucks. You really want to discard it. But if you're able to discard Abrasive, this effect is just so much value in one card. Gaining any point of dexterity on the Silent is really good since you're picking all the good block cards. And getting 4 Thorns is also not insignificant damage. It's going to add up over time, and there are also a bunch of enemies that multi-hit you. Upgrading to 6 Thorns, this upgrade actually is pretty good. It's a pretty significant damage upgrade, but usually you have better things to upgrade than Abrasive. It turns out being able to get Dexterity for free is just an extremely strong effect. So Abrasive will be one of the strongest slide payoffs. We will go into S tier. Next up, we got Acrobatics. 1 energy skill, draw 3 cards, discard a card. This card used to be common, now it's uncommon. Changing from common to uncommon doesn't really affect the card. The only rarity that matters is rare, because you often get rare cards as your boss reward, and uncommon doesn't matter. A very good card. Draw 3 cards by itself for 1 energy, it's standard rate. Discarding a card, even without slide synergies, are gonna be upsides a lot of the time. There are a lot of enemies that put nasty statuses into your deck, and you can just discard them. With slide synergy, Acrobatics is completely insane. Very often, the downside for card draw is you don't have enough energy to play rest of your hand. But Acrobatics, you draw into a slide card, and suddenly you cheat energy with Acrobatics. In Act 1, even if you have no slide synergy, you're offered Acrobatics, you can often consider it if it's not up against something better. And if you do have the slide synergies, Acrobatics is one of the strongest enablers. So Acrobatics will be an S tier card. Next card, the Calculated Gamble. 0 energy skill, discard your hand and draw that many cards. Exhaust. Upgrade to retain. So upgrade on Cal Gamble, pretty decent. You can hold it in hand until you have a bad hand or you draw your slide cards. So you can discard all your slide cards with Cal Gamble. Even without any slide synergy, this is still a good card because you're able to dig deeper into your deck to find your power sooner. So this doesn't even require slide to be good. With slide, this is just like extremely huge amount of value. You discard the entire hand, trigger a bunch of slide, then you get a new hand to play with, and it costs 0, so you don't even lose energy. So even without slide, the first copy usually good in every deck. With slide, also one of the best ways to trigger them. Calculated Gamble, another S tier card. Dagger Throw, 1 energy, 9 damage, draw a card, discard a card. 1 energy for 9 kind of sucks. What Dagger Throw basically represents is you pick the slide card, then you have literally no other ways to discard, then you're offered a Dagger Throw. Then you can pick it to make your slide more consistent. Pretty much all the ways to discard cards is going to be better than Dagger Throw. 1 energy 9 is just 2 below par, so it does not end up being very good. So Dagger Throw is going to be in C tier. If you are really desperate for any sort of discard, you can pick the Dagger Throw, otherwise the damage on the card is just too low. Flick Flag, 1 energy slide. Deal 6 damage to all enemies, upgrade to 8. Yeah, free damage is good. AoE damage even better because there are going to be a lot of AoE fights in the game. Unfortunately, 1 energy 6 isn't that high. It can't actually deal with all the AoE fights in the game, so you might even want to get more. But free damage is free damage, and Flick Flag is not too bad. There's a slight payoff. Flick Flag is okay. I will place it in A tier. Hand Trick, gain 7 block, add a slide to your skill in your hand this turn, upgrading to 10 block. If this card comes upgraded, I would just pick it without any slide synergy because it's just 1 energy block 10, and that's pretty good. Unupgraded, however, the second line of text on Hand Trick just very inconsistent. You need to have a skill in your hand worth putting the slide effect on. Then you need to have a slide enabler in your hand, so a way to discard to line them up, and this effect is temporary. If you put a slide effect on a 1 energy card, you don't even get that much out of it. Let's say you play Hand Trick on like some 1 energy card, then you play Acrobatics to discard that card. That's already 2 energy gone. Then you have 1 energy for the rest of your turn. The Hand Trick end up being way too conditional. The only redeeming quality for the Hand Trick is it's the upgrade. If it comes upgraded, pretty good card. If you have an excess of discarding and literally no payoffs, maybe you can consider a Hand Trick. Otherwise, unupgraded, very bad. Next up, Haze, 3 energy skill. Slide, apply 4 poison to your enemy. 3 energy, you're never playing this, so basically only consider this as a slide card. Upgrading to 6. The upgrade is pretty significant. 2 poison on a upgrade. So Haze is basically the desperation slide payoff. You pick a bunch of discard and you have literally no way to use them. You can consider a Haze. 4 poison to your enemies just is a little bit too low. Against bosses, 4 poison doesn't scale enough. Against Holy Fight, 4 poison isn't fast enough. But since it's a slide card and basically all the slide cards are just free, if you have the deck for it, Haze will be plays into C tier. Master Planner, 2 energy power. Whenever you play a skill, it gains Slide, upgrading to 1 energy. This card really requires the upgrade, 2 energy. You kind of can never play it. It's way too expensive. So the turn you play Master Planner, it doesn't do anything. But eventually, as the fight progresses, all the skills in your deck are gonna gain Slide. So this is like an energy card. If your deck is lacking output, like you don't have any way to scale dexterity, you don't have after image, stuff like that, you can consider Master Planner as your in-game scaling solution. In faster hallway fights, elite fight, this card is like 2 energy do nothing, which is not what you want. The Master Planner is a pretty brute force boss off. You play it and eventually you get to play your entire deck for free. But that takes a pretty long time. And if you have any other way to scale up your deck, you don't really need Master Planner. But it does solve the end game pretty competently. Even against a Doormaker, it's still gonna increase your output. The Master Planner will be in C tier. Memento Mori, deal 9 damage, deals 4 additional damage for each card discarded this turn for 1 energy. Memento Mori basically is like you have no slide payoff, then you are offered Memento Mori and you can consider it. It's the worst of the worst slide payoffs because the other slide payoffs does not require energy. This one does. This one costs 1 energy. A lot of the value for slide cards is that they're free, so you can actually play your acrobatics, spend the energy on the card draw, and don't fall behind on tempo. Memento Mori unfortunately doesn't do that. The upgrade is pretty big, upgrade to 11 and 5. But yeah, if you literally have any way to get slide payoff, there really just isn't a place for Memento Mori. So unfortunately, not a very good card. Memento Mori will go into D tier. If you are like desperate for a slide payoff, you could consider it, but there are just much better ways to do that. Prepared. 0 energy skill, draw a card, discard a card. Any card that says 0 energy draw should already trigger alarm bells. That's gonna be pretty broken in any card game, Slay the Spire 2 included. The fact that this discards a card is a free slide enabler, upgrading to draw 2, discard 2. The upgrade on Prepared essentially actually let you dig deeper into your deck to find your powers. So even if you do not have slide synergies, Prepare Plus still provides a decent amount of value. Since I'm pretty much going to be picking the first slide payoff in any given run, Prepared usually gets into your deck. At least the first copy of Prepared gets into your deck. The second copy is a little bit more suspicious if you cannot upgrade it. The upgrade makes a big difference on Prepared. It lets you actually draw deeper into your deck and find either the slide cards or your powers consistently. But yeah, 0 energy draw is just too strong, so we have to put Prepared in S tier. Next time we've got Reflex, 3 energy, slide, draw 2 cards. Upgrading to draw 3 cards. Very funny thing with Reflex is if you get it from a skill potion, it costs 0 and you just play it for 2 draw. But yeah, usually Reflex is also one of the better slide payoffs. You get to draw more cards. A small issue with Reflex is that if you're playing acrobatics, you draw into Reflex to draw 2 more cards. The card draw might not be the best thing since you are already spending energy on acrobatics, but it is still free card draw. This is really, really good with Prepared in particular. You're getting card draw for 0 energy. So Reflex still end up being a pretty good card. So another issue with Reflex compared to some of those other slide payoffs is that you cannot really reasonably play it just as a card. A lot of the other slide payoffs, you can actually just play them if you have nothing better to do. Reflex on 4-1 isn't my favorite. I do want a bit more discard in the deck for me to be picking a Reflex. But if you're able to support Reflex, free card draw, very, very powerful. The Reflex will be an A tier card. Ricochet, 2 energy attack, slide. Deal 3 damage to a random enemy 4 times, so 12 damage. This card has 12 damage for 0, then obviously it's completely broken, and very often this does say 12 damage for 0. The upgrade is 1 additional hit that scales very well with any source of strength gain. Multi-hits in this game is just inherently very good. There are a bunch of enchantments that make the number on the card larger. There are a bunch of relics also want your cards to be upgraded. For example, the cannon that makes your upgraded attacks do more damage. So Ricochet is a pretty crazy card for that. This is one of the best slide payoffs because in the worst case scenario, you're playing 2 energy do 12. Well, pretty horrible, but not the worst thing in the world. And if you're spending 0 energy to do 12, that's completely ridiculous. This card deals way too much damage. So with all the potential synergies with strength, with relics, enchantments, and the fact that 0 energy 12 is just too much value, Ricochet is like one of the best slide payoffs. Ricochet will be an S tier card. Tools of the Trade. At the start of your turn, draw a card and discard a card. Upgrading to 0. Upgrade, very good. Any energy upgrading in this game is just extremely strong since you are very unlikely to get energy boss relics. So Prepared is an S tier card. Tools of the Trade, place a Prepared every turn. That sounds pretty good. This allows you to very consistently trigger your Slay synergies. Even if you do not have any Slay payoffs, this is still good. It allows you to draw a card every turn to filter your hand. And the discard one card part usually is not even a downside. There are a bunch of enemies that put status cards into your deck, so it can be an upside even without Slay. And the upgrade is just so good. 0 energy card draw. One of the best card draw card on the character, one of the best Slay enablers on the character. Tools of the Trade, pretty much good in any deck, and if your deck has any Slay synergies, it gets even better. The tools will be an S tier card. Tactician, 3 energy Slay, gain 1 energy, upgrading to gain 2 energy. So similar to Reflex, this card might as well be unplayable because you're not spending 3 to gain 1. Compared to the other Slay payoffs, Tactician does require you to be able to discard it consistently. This card goes better with Acro because you're spending the energy to draw cards, now you can get your energy back. Reflex goes well with Prepare because you're spending 0 energy on the draw to draw more cards. So even though infinite in this game is like not really possible or even desirable to pursue anymore, Tactician just end up being pretty good energy gain. It's also one of the good Slay payoffs. It will go into A tier with Reflex. Untouchable, 2 energy Slay, gain 6 block. This card is insane. It used to be like 9 block or 8 block, and that was completely ridiculous. Even at 6 block, still completely overpowered. If they nerf this card to like gain 4 block, it still would be a good card. But yeah, at 6 block, very strong. Upgrading to 8 block. So 0 energy block 6 is already very good rate, and you can even think about Untouchable as like semi card draw, because if you play like Acrobatics or Prepare drawn to Untouchable, you can just discard it instead of discarding a real card from your hand. So that kind of increases your hand size. This is one of the strongest Slay payoffs on the character. Like I have mentioned, Silent really want to block, and Untouchable blocks. So Untouchable, yet another S tier Slay payoff. So that's all for the Slay cards. The first copy of Slay payoff usually can get into the deck. However, you do not really want to overpick them without sufficient support. Otherwise, you will get into a situation where you're breaking your hand every turn, you draw a bunch of Slay cards and no way to discard them. So be careful with that. But the first copy with Survivor already in the deck can already be picked since it's such a strong effect. Part 6. Additional damage cards. Besides the main synergy packages I've mentioned so far, Silent has quite a few efficient damage options that stand on their own, ranging from good early game front load damage to end game solves. You can win quite a lot of rounds without ever touching a Shiv or poison card thanks to these. So first up on the list, we got Assassinate, 0 energy attack, innate, deal 10 damage, apply a vulnerable, exhaust, upgrading to 13 and 2 vulnerable. Upgrade pretty good. Getting another turn of vulnerable is a lot of value. This card in a vacuum, obviously extremely strong. You got your starter relic drawing 2 more cards on turn 1, so 0 cost innate card just have a lot of value. Unfortunately, it's a rare card, so it has some pretty tough competition against other rares. Silent rares are extremely strong. So while Assassinate being a pretty good front load damage card, there are just better rares on the character. I had to put Assassinate in B tier. We have Backstab, 0 energy, innate card, deal 11 damage, exhaust. We just looked at Assassinate. This is basically worse Assassinate since it doesn't apply the vulnerable, but it's an uncommon, so you can actually pick it without it being up against other rares. So 0 energy for 11, obviously very strong front load. You can kind of just have a Backstab in every single deck to deal with the early game. In the end game, it falls off quite a bit, but it's not even so bad. For example, in Act 3, you have like the triple screws that hit you for 1 million on turn 1. Backstab can deal with that pretty competently. So generally, you're gonna be pretty happy to have a Backstab in pretty much every deck. So funnily enough, even though Assassinate is a better card, I'm going to be placing Backstab in A tier above it just because it's not competing against other rare cards on the Silent. But like if you get Assassinate Backstab in like a random hallway, obviously you pick the Assassinate over the Backstab. Dagger Spray, 1 energy attack, deal 4 damage to all enemies twice, upgrading to 6. Pretty good upgrade. It's gonna be a 4 damage AoE upgrade. That's decent value. AoE cards in this game are just pretty good since there are a lot of dangerous AoE fights, and Dagger Spray being multi-hit also have a lot of value. There are just a lot of random enchantment relics that cares about multi-hit, and Dagger Spray is a pretty good one to carry those enchantments. So as an early game damage card, it's AoE, so that's sufficient, and it has some potential to scale with random relics or enchantments. I'll be putting Dagger Spray in B tier. Echoing Slash, deal 10 damage damage to all enemies. Repeat this effect for each enemy killed, upgrading to 13. So Echoing Slash, if you're able to trigger the effect one time, that's gonna be 1 energy, 20 AoE. That's ridiculous. Very, very good value for 1 energy. Again, single target enemy, this doesn't really do anything, but it's a tech card for AoE, and for that purpose, Echoing Slash is very good at its job. It's not too difficult to set up an enemy on 10 or less HP in AoE fights, then you play Echoing Slash, then you do 20 damage. Sometimes you can even set it up that Echoing Slash deals like 30 damage AoE, and that's completely ridiculous. So Echoing Slash as an AoE solve, very, very competent. Doesn't do anything else besides that, but since it's so good at its job, Echoing Slash can be an A tier card. Finisher. 1 energy attack, deal 6 damage for each attack already played this turn. Way too draw order dependent. The only way to consistently use Finisher is going to be with Shivs. So Finisher basically says you have Shivs, you have no way to make your Shivs better. So here's a Finisher to make them better. Unfortunately, that effect is usually not required. First of all, any ways to scale up your shift is just going to be better than Finisher. Second of all, you don't even need to make your shifts better. You can have damage to come from a variety different places. The early game Finisher just doesn't end up being very good since it's so draw order dependent. And if you have some shifts and you really need that damage, then sure, you can consider the Finisher. But that's just not very likely to be the case most runs. The Finisher will be in D tier. Flechette. 1 energy attack, deal 5 damage for each skill in your hand, upgrading to 7. Pretty good upgrade. As we have seen, Silent really loves blocking, and they're mostly skill cards that blocks. And you have a Flechette, you have a bunch of skills that blocks. The thing goes in for like 25 damage for 1. That's pretty crazy. Since it's a multi-hit attack, I already said the multi-hit attack in this game have inherent value that makes Flechette even better. This is one of the cards that can just solve the endgame damage by itself if you can make Flechette scale up. So early game Flechette already not too bad, has a very high potential. This is one of the better damage cards on the Silent. Flechette will be going into A tier. Follow through. 1 energy, deal 7 damage. If you have 5 or more other cards in your hand, hit an additional time. So on floor 1, follow through, 1 energy, deal 7. That's a strike. If you are able to make follow through consistent, it's still only 1 energy, deal 14. That's just not really worth it for 1 energy. There are like 3 main ways to make follow through work. First of all is you have a lot of card draw, then follow through can be played after you draw cards. Second of all is you are retaining cards, either with like Whirly Plants or Snakebite or anything like that, then you just have a larger hand every turn. And finally, you can make Shivs. You put a bunch of Shivs into your hand and follow through works. But you are jumping a bunch of hoops to make follow through work, and the payoff is just not enough. So unfortunately, follow through will be going to D tier. Grand Finale. Can only be played if there are no cards in your draw pile. Deal 60 damage to all enemies, upgrading to 75. Very difficult condition to activate. The payoff is obviously huge, but if you're able to consistently play Grand Finale, you are probably winning anyways. So Grand Finale end up being not very good. It's also a rare card, and silent rares are crazy. You're not going to be picking Grand Finale over any decent rare. So to make Grand Finale work, you really need to be able to have retain. So have Whirly Plants to retain Grand Finale. You have variable card draw, so you want to be able to draw like 3 cards, 2 cards, 1 cards to set up the draw pile to proc it. It's a lot of effort to set it up, and it just doesn't happen most runs. The payoff is huge. So if you're desperate, your deck literally doesn't do anything. You can try to pick a Grand Finale and make it work, but like 99.9% of the time, that's just not required. And another downside for Grand Finale is that it doesn't have an animation. So Grand Finale will be in D tier. This card, I don't think I can say the name for YouTube. 3 energy, deal 1 damage, deals additional damage for each card drawn this combat, upgrading to 2. Upgrade pretty good. Any energy upgrade in this game is not bad. This card just scales up way too slowly, but if you just sit there, and eventually this card will be hitting a pretty high number. So if you're desperate for a boss solution, you can pick this one. But yeah, as a rare card, a little bit too slow, doesn't really do it against any fast hallway or elites. And if you have any other damage scaling, this card is not really required. So this card does have a place and a time that just doesn't happen very often. So for the M card, I will be placing it in C tier. Pinpoint, 3 energy attack, deal 15 damage, cost 1 less energy for each skill played this turn, upgrading to 19. So +4 upgrade, pretty good. This card might as well say 0 energy, deal 15, because you just play your block cards and you can play Pinpoint for free. That's a very very strong effect. In addition, if you are playing any free skills, you discount pinpoint even more. You can play like another attack even with pinpoint. A lot of the Shiv cards are also skills, so even if you're not blocking, you can still discount pinpoint. Very strong early game card, very good at killing the early elites. Pinpoint will be in A tier. Next up, we got Precise Cut. 0 energy attack, deal 13 damage, deal 2 less damage for each other card in your hand, upgrading to 16. Very, very similar to pinpoint. The idea is the same, right? You play all your block cards first, then you play Precise Cut for 0. So even if Precise Cut hit for like 0 energy 9, that's still a very, very good rate. Compared to pinpoint, this card is a little less output, but more flexible. You don't necessarily have to dump your hand to play it since it costs 0. Another pretty decent early game damage card on the silent. Precise Cut can also be in A tier. Pounds. 2 energy attack, deal 12 damage. The next skill you'll play costs 0, upgrading to 18. This upgrade is freaking massive, plus 6. So if you're picking Pounds early, you kind of do really want to upgrade it. You can think of Pounds as like a Giga Iron Wave. You play Pounds for 2, then you play your block card for 3. Unfortunately, most of the best block cards on the silent are 1 cost, so there's only discount 1 energy. But even if you're paying 1 energy 12, that's already okay, and the upgrade is just so massive, right? If you're able to discount any more expensive skills, then the value also goes through the roof. As an early game card, Pounds is pretty good. As you progress later into the run, you no longer need this sort of effects. Another good thing about Pounds is that the discount lasts between turns. You don't have to play the skill on the same turn, so it makes it more flexible. So Pounds, very good early game card, very massive upgrade. I'll be placing this in B tier. Predator, 2 energy attack, deal 15 damage. Next turn, draw 2 cards. 2 energy for 15 is below rate, so that's not great. Next turn, draw 2 cards is an okay effect, but on the silent, you're kind of picking every backflip, every acro, so you don't really need this card draw effect that often. As an early game damage card, Predator is just not efficient enough, and as a late game card, you just have way better ways to draw a card, making this card very awkward. Predator existed in Spire 1, and it was a slightly better card there. Because of the existence of Gremlin Knob and Slime Balls, you're desperate for any sort of frontal damage, and the upgrade, being a +5 upgrade, is like just barely good enough to pick. But even in Slay the Spire 1, as we got better at the silent, Predator was just no longer a super good card if you can get away without picking it. In Spire 2, that early game damage pressure no longer exists, so Predator ended up being a pretty bad card. If you're desperate for front load damage, you can consider it. Otherwise, I will just pick anything that's better than Predator. So Predator will go into C tier. Serpent Form, 3 energy power. Whenever you play a card that deals 4 damage to a random enemy, upgrading to 6 damage. Just 3 energy power should raise some eyebrows. Nobody got enough time to spend 3 energy on a power that doesn't even do anything on the turn it's played. This card is way too expensive for what it does. If you're struggling against the boss, then sure, you can consider it. Also, it's like a pretty good hit off a power potion. But other than that, picking Serpent Form as like your end of Act 1 rare into Act 2, you're just never gonna be able to play it in the majority of Act 2. So unfortunately, Serpent Form will also be in D tier. Next up, we got Skewer X cost, deal 8 damage X times, upgrading to 11. The upgrade is not bad. 1 energy 8 is just not good enough of a rate. Skewer kind of just suffers the same fate as Predator, where it's like a pickable card in Spire 1 just due to the frontal damage pressure on the silent. In Spire 2, that does not exist, so you basically never want the Skewer. The only use case now is like Chem-X, and you're not really blind purchasing a Chem-X, so you kind of need like a Malaise already in your deck for the Chem-X to be good. Now after that, you can consider Skewer. 0 energy for 16 obviously is very strong, but yeah, basically more or less a desperation early game damage card. Next up, we got Slice, 0 energy, deal 6. So in theory, 0 energy damage card, not the worst thing ever. Unfortunately, it's a too low of an impact of a draw. You don't want to add too many random attacks into your deck. You're breaking your block cards, you're breaking your power cards. So if you can get away without picking Slice, you should just not pick it. If you have an excessive amount of draw and no slide payoffs, you can consider the Slice. If you really need a damage card, you could consider a Slice, but other than that, the number on the card just isn't large enough. The Slice will be going into C tier. Next up, we got Strangle, 1 energy 8. Whenever you play a card this turn, the enemy loses 2 HP, upgrading to 10 and 3. So as a very, very baseline, you play Strangle and 2 more cards to spend your 3 energy. This can potentially be 1 energy 12. And that's not the worst. If you have any 0 cost or any shifts, the number on Strangle can get larger. The enemy loses HP part has some niche utility. The main one I can think of is against the 4 Phantasmal Gardeners. You play Strangle, they gain the block, but you can just play more additional block cards, they will lose HP without you needing to worry about the block. So some niche interactions that this can be an upside. As a baseline, 1 energy 12, not the worst thing ever in the early game. If you're able to spam some cards or play some shifts, this can get better, so has a little bit of potential. Compared to all the other bad early game damage cards, Strangle does do a little bit more damage, so I'll be placing Strangle in B tier. Speedster, 2 energy power. Whenever you draw a card during your turn, deal 2 damage to all enemies, upgrading to innate. If you want to pick this card, upgrade is pretty important, so it can actually do something. So yet another damage power that's very expensive, doesn't do anything the turn is played, unless you can afford to draw some cards on the turn is played. It costs 2, you play acrobatics, you no longer have energy left, so you cannot block. And the damage number on Speedster is just too low. I much rather just have any other slight payoff compared to Speedster, any other damage scaling compared to this card. So Speedster will also go into D tier. Shadow Step, 1 energy skill, discard your hand, next turn attacks deal double damage, upgrading to 0. So there's a card called Phantasmal Killer in Slay the Spire 1 that just says next turn attacks deal double damage. It doesn't have that discard part. Adding discard to Shadow Step is a massive downside. You might say, oh, but it triggers slide, but one of the main use cases for this kind of effect is you retain your attacks with like a Runic Pyramid or Wily Plants. Then you actually have attacks to play next turn with the double damage. Shadow Step, discard them all. So unfortunately, very inconsistent. You're not picking that many attacks on the silent, and you no longer have the option to hold them in your hand with the discard effect. The upgrade is good. Any energy upgrading in this game is pretty good. However, this card is way too draw order dependent, and the way to fix the draw order for this card no longer exists due to the discard. If you're desperate for damage, then sure, but you need to be pretty desperate to be picking Shadow Step. So Shadow Step will go into D tier. Finally, we have Tracking. Weak enemies take double damage from attacks, upgrading to 1. Another very good upgrade. Double your damage. Do I need to say more? This card says double your damage. Silent has plenty of access to weak, so the condition is not super difficult to met, and the effect on Tracking is ridiculous. This is a single card damage solve for like the entire game. The Tracking will be straight up into S tier. That's all for the other damage cards on the silent. As you can see, some of them provide a very good early game value, while others completely solve the end game by themselves without requiring any synergy packages. Part 7, the essential support cards. These are the cards that don't quite fit into any of the above sections, but perform a critical role the silent needs. First card, Adrenaline. 0 energy skill, gain energy, draw 3 cards, exhaust, upgrading to 2 energy. Hopefully I don't need to explain why Adrenaline is completely broken. 0 energy card draw and energy gain. Help you set up a much larger turn, help you deploy your powers faster. You can kind of pick every single copy of Adrenaline if it's not against something that you need more. Also, very good clone target. So if you get Adrenaline, you get clone, you win the run. Yeah, one of the best cards on the silent period. Adrenaline will be going straight up into S tier. Bullet Time. 3 energy skill, you cannot draw additional card this turn. All cards in your hand are free to play, upgrading to 2 cost. This card is unchanged from Spire 1, but the main use cases of Bullet Time has been killed. You no longer get Runic Pyramid, you no longer get Snake Eye. I mean, they technically exist in this game, but you pretty much never see them. So Bullet Time at 99% of the time just end up being gain 1 energy, and it's gonna break your draws. For a rare card, that's just unacceptable. There are way better rares on the silent. If it's upgraded, then sure, you can play like Acrobatics into Bullet Time. You actually have 3 energy to spare, but there are also just way better things to spend your upgrade on compared to Bullet Time. The Bullet Time in Slay the Spire 2 just doesn't have that many uses. I'll be placing this in D tier. Burst. 1 energy skill. This turn, your next skill is played an extra time, upgrading to the next 2 skills. From what we have seen, Silent allows blocking, so your deck is going to be filled with a bunch of block cards, and Burst pretty much can always hit your best block card from your hand. Sometimes you can burst like a very good skill, then that gets even better. It's a little inconsistent. If you don't have ways to line up Burst, it doesn't end up being that much value by itself. However, Burst has enough potential to be picked over Skip. And if you have the ability to line up Burst, for example with the Wily Plants, it also gets much better. So Burst will go into B tier. A little inconsistent, but even if it's not at its best, at least it's usually gonna convert into block. And if you're able to line it up with something good, it has very good potential. Expose. 0 energy skill, remove all artifact and block from the enemy, apply to vulnerable, exhaust, upgrading to 3 vulnerable. So 0 energy skill skill, Emerald Listening, 0-cost cards in this game are generally pretty good. And the effect on Expose is really good. There are a lot of random enemies that have artifact and Expose can deal with them. There are also a bunch of enemies that has block in this game and Expose removes all the block. The most funny example is like the Tunneler in Act 2. It gains like 37 block or whatever, and after you break its block, it gets stunned. You play one Expose, it's instantly stunned. And 0 energy for 2 vulnerable is just a decent effect. Scales you up your damage by quite a bit, so it's just a solid damage card. Be careful with this card in boss fights because 2 vulnerable doesn't last that long. If your entire damage plan revolves around Expose, you might actually run out of damage against bosses. Yeah, first copy of Expose, generally pretty happy to pick up. Just because Expose have all these random uses, I'll be placing this in A tier. Expertise. 1 energy skill, draw cards until you have 6 in your hand, upgrading to 7. So as a baseline, expertise basically draws 2 cards. You have 5 cards in hand, you play it, then you have 4 cards, draws to 6. That's a very, very poor rate for a card draw card. Silent has access to way better card draw cards that also happen to synergize with Slay. Very often, you're also interested in retaining cards in your hand. Either you have a card that just retains or have Wily Plans in play, then expertise might be 1 energy, draw 0. Card draw, well, being good in this game, it's not going to be something that you're desperate for in the very early game, so expertise is pretty much unpickable early on, and you have so much time to see any sort of card draw besides expertise. This card just ends up being not needed for any run. The rate on the card as a baseline is just too poor, and there's not that many ways to get cards out of hand besides just playing them, but if you're playing them, you're spending energy, then you have to spend more energy on expertise, you end up with no energy to go with the card draw. In Spire 1, there was Concentrate that actually discarded cards from your hand. That was a pretty good combo with expertise, but that does not exist in Spire 2. So expertise is just not very good. I'll be putting this in D tier. Nightmare, 3 energy skill, choose a card, next turn add 3 copies of that card into your hand, exhaust. Upgrading to 2 cost, upgrade is pretty important if you actually want to pick this. Unfortunately, this card is pretty unpickable. 3 cost skill is way too expensive for what it does. The scaling requirement for the endgame is not so high that you actually need Nightmare to beat them, and the best Nightmare targets are no longer in the game. You don't have Rage Form, you don't have Catalyst. It does have some pretty good interactions with stuff like History Cores that replace your last cards. You can like replay the Nightmare, but usually if you have History Cores, you already win the run very convincingly. You don't need Nightmare on top of that. If the game gets harder, you need more scaling for the endgame. I can see Nightmare being more valuable, but at the current state of the game, it's pretty unpickable. Nightmare will be in D tier. The Haunt, 1 energy attack, deal 10 damage, if fatal, gain an additional card reward, exhaust, upgrading to 15. This upgrade doesn't really matter. So as we have seen, Silent has a lot of broken cards, and Haunt just lets you see more of the broken cards. End of Act 1, this probably just wins a run by itself since you are seeing so many more card rewards. End of Act 2 over skip is probably still positive, but at the end of Act 2, you probably want to pick something that's higher impact compared to the Haunt. Also, if you're able to land Haunt against the boss, you will see 2 rare cards. So end of Act 1 Haunt provides you with a ton of value, therefore I'll be placing this in S tier. Wily Plans, 1 energy power. At the end of your turn, retain up to a card, upgrading to retain up to 2 cards. Retaining cards is very, very powerful. The best ancient relic by far is Runic Pyramid that just retains your entire hand every turn. Wily Plans is like a mini Runic Pyramid. Wily Plans lets you line up your Slay payoff with your Slay enablers. It lets you play the best card for each situation. For example, you can hold the Piercing Wheel until the enemy multi-hits you. And even if you're just hitting block cards, you're able to block more consistently. Basically, every single Silent deck wants Wily Plans, maybe even multiple copies of Wily Plans. It just provides so much consistency. Wily Plans will be going directly into S tier. Finally, we got Wraith Form. 3 energy power, gain 3 intangible. At the start of your turn, lose a dexterity. This comes upgraded since it's an ancient reward. In a vacuum, Wraith Form is a pretty good card. It basically allows you to full block every fast fight while you're focusing on killing the enemies. Even some elite fight, you can just slam Wraith Form and kill all the elites. Unfortunately, a lot of the Silent game plan is about sitting around blocking, and Wraith Form kind of go against that. The losing 1 dexterity downside is a little bit more real in this game compared to Spire 1. In Slay the Spire 1, there are also a lot of enemy that hits you for like 100 on the turn, and Wraith Form is a very good answer for that. Those sort of enemies just also don't exist in Slay the Spire 2. Furthermore, you don't have access to energy relics most of the time, so the 3 cost on Wraith Form is a little bit more steep. The time you play Rage Form, you have no energy to play attacks, and in the turns that they're intangible, you have less energy to kill the enemies with. If the Rage Form was just like a card that you can pick, it's gonna be a very good card still, but it's an ancient reward. So let's look at all the ancient rewards. The Rage Form is from Dusty Tome. Upon pickup, obtain ancient card. It's from Darv. Darv is probably the strongest ancient in the game. It has some of the most broken relics the game has to offer. So Runic Pyramid, Pandora's Box, those are extremely strong. Even the energy relics, they are probably usually better than Rage Form. I would argue Astrolabe is also better than Rage Form. Sequoia is a little bit more situational on the Silent. Silent doesn't have that many chunky cards that just very high impact by itself. I guess Calling Bell, Empty Cage are probably worse than Rage Form, but overall Rage Form is gonna be a below average Darv reward. So the ranking of Rage Form is gonna be relative to the other Darv reward instead of relative to the other cards that's on this list. I'll be placing Rage Form in C tier since it's a below average Darv reward. That's the complete Silent character breakdown. Let me recap the core strategy. 1. Focus on solving block. You don't have to construct the best damage combos if you can just block enough. 2. While Silent is very strong in Act 1, you don't have to force max elite if the damage is not quite there yet. 3. Slay is a very strong keyword and can be used most decks, but don't force only Slay cards every round. Let me know in the comments which card rankings you agree or disagree with. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like and subscribe button for more Slay the Spire 2 strategy content. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.